Yo, how's it going? And today, we're going to be ranking every single mantra in Deepwoken. Now, due to how many mantras there are, I've had to split this video into 4 parts. So if you don't want to miss any of them, you better subscribe right now. I'm trying to reach 3,000 subscribers, so this would help me out a ton. Thank you. But without further ado, let's get into part 1. Now this works the same as a normal tier list, going from S to F. And first up, of course, we have Flamecharm. And of course, the first flame mantra is going to be an S tier, which is Fireblade. Fireblade is just a really good roll catcher, a good feint, a good block breaker, good damage. It just does everything really good. And unsurprisingly, it's one of 2 of Flame's S tiers. But we'll get into that later, because for the next mantra, we have Flame Repulsion. This is going to get an A tier. While it is very good for roll catching, it isn't as good as Fireblade, but it is still a really good mantra. Comparing any flame mantra to Fireblade is not going to do any other mantra well. But moving on to another A tier, Burning Servants. This mantra just does really good damage and is just really solid, especially if you have Fan the Flames, which just makes this way bigger than it should be. Next, we have our first D tier, Fire Gun. Realistically, you're only going to be using this as a level 1 freshie, and while it is not bad for PvE, its lack of PvP viability is just not helping it at all. Next up, we have Flame Grab, which is an easy A tier. This mantra just lasts way too long and can just really catch rolls way too well, along with doing very solid damage and also comboing into an eruption if you have that path. Following that up, we have Flame Blind, which this has got to get a B tier. While Concussive Flash is a decent enough talent, Dazing kinda got nerfed, so it's not too helpful. And at the end of the day, you can just spam roll or hold block. Now on to the starred mantras, we got Fire Palm. This is gonna get an easy A tier as well. The damage and range is pretty solid, and not much more to say about it. Next mantra is Fire Eruption. This is gonna get a B tier. While the second hit block breaks, it really isn't gonna do that much. But with modifiers and slide casting, this can be a decent mantra. And then we have Fire Forge, which also is gonna get an easy A tier. This is basically Fire Palm, but there's more talents for it. And realistically, you kind of want this mantra on every build, but it isn't as good to make it an S tier. Now onto the 2-star mantras, which we have Relentless Flames. This is gonna get a C tier. Sorry to say, but it's just not that good outside of PvE. And if you do use it against someone in PvP, they better be pretty bad at parrying. Next, we have Flame Sentinel, which is literally the same exact case for Relentless Flames, which also gives it a C tier. It's just okay at PvP, and it's alright in PvE, I guess. But following that up, we have Rising Flame, which unfortunately is gonna get a B tier. While the mantra is fun to use, it's just kind of inconsistent to land sometimes. And realistically, you only pick it up for the talent and then trade it out for another mantra. And then we have Flare Volley. Now, I've not really used this mantra. However, fighting against it, it seems to do a decent amount of damage, and it is spammable. But overall, it's gonna get a B tier. Now on to 3-star mantras, we have Ash Slam, which this is also an easy A tier. The damage and ragdoll is just really nice to have, and slide casting this makes it no joke. Next, we have Flame Ballista, which unfortunately is gonna get a C tier. The damage if you land it is decent, but at the same time, it's really only useful for ganks. And for the final combat mantra, we have Flaming Scourge. And I'm really sad to say this is getting a D tier. It's just not that good in this day and age. It kinda got over nerfed. And unless you have a combo into it, it's really not that good at all. Now on to the mobility mantras, we have Flame Leap, which of course is A tier. Now this does have a spark, but I'm really just more of a fan of the base version, which is very good for mobility and it can combo. And then we have Flame Assault, which is gonna get a B tier. After the nerfs, it's still alright. And then we go to the support mantras, which here's our next S tier, Flame Wisp. Now this mantra really just gives you free healing in a fight, and it's easily the strongest wisp in the game. And keep in mind, I'm trying to be very tight on what I allow in S tier. And for the next mantra, we have Graceful Flame, which is gonna get a B tier. This is not that useful outside of PvE, but it's not horrible. And finally, we have Flame of Denial. This is going to get an A tier. While most people don't really run it, it is kind of underrated, although it is also kind of hard to use. So it could end up in B tier if you really think about it. Before we move on to Gale, I would like to say that it is kind of hard to find more transitions for each mantra, so sorry for that. First up, we have Windblade, which this is just really a kind of mid mantra. And unfortunately, Gale does have a lot of B tiers, but it's only because I'm very critical of this attunement because I played a lot. And Windblade just has the same issues as the Air Force, which is also B tier, which the damage is kind of not there. Now this can be decent, but it's just not for me. Following that up, we have Tornado Kick, which is sadly a D tier. This really is the mantra you use as a level 1 to train your Gale. And then we have Gale Lunge, which is going to be A tier. Now I know a lot of people would say this is S tier, but I honestly think a mantra has taken this over as the best Gale mantra. Next we have Tornado, which is going to be B. It's kind of not that good in PvP, but in PvE it's pretty good. Following that, we have Heavenly Wind, which is A tier. Fainting with this is really fun, and the damage is not bad at all. Next, we have Gale Trap, which is going to be a B tier. It's kind of not that good, but it's alright. And then we have Gale Punch, which is another B tier, because it's not that bad, not that great. And then we have another B tier, Windforge, which is not that good, not that great. But I'm sure some people could find some fun in these. But now we get to the real S tier of Gale, which is Twister Kicks. Roll catching with this is so good, and it just hits so many times that the damage is crazy. And this really should be used on every single Gale build. But we must move on with the list. Which next we have Champion's World Throw, which is sadly a C tier. It's kind of the worst guard break in the game right now, and while it can be a little finicky, it's usually not that worth using. Next we have Rising Wind, which is A tier. It's just a really fun and good mantra. What more can I say about it? Following that up, we have Wind Gun, which is a B tier. The damage is not bad at all. It's just kind of takes a long time to learn how to train your aim, and it really encourages a spacing style. Then we have Wind Carve, which is C tier. This mantra after the Haunted Gale nerf kind of isn't that useful anymore, but it's not horrible. And then we have a fan favorite, which is Astral Wind, which unfortunately is A tier. Against really good players, this mantra is not that useful, but it definitely is a low elo demon. And on to the last 3 mantras, we have Pillars of Aricia, which is a B tier. The range is actually not that bad, and you do get hyper armor during it. However, it's not really a combat tool, and you just throw it out to throw it out. And then we have Wind Passage, which is A tier. And this is a really good mantra, it just really isn't on the same level as Twister Kicks. And finally, the last mantra, Gale Wisp, which is A tier. Now with Spectre Path, this is a really good mantra, as you literally get infinite Phantom Step. However, it just isn't on the same tier as Flame Wisp, which is pretty unfortunate. But that's really going to do it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.